Right, folks. Well, thank you very much for coming to our State of the Nation in Christchurch. The election campaign is really kicking up a gear. We feel that New Zealanders need a choice that won't pretend everything is perfect, but also is collegial and effective at getting change in government, even on issues others are afraid to talk about. That is what the ACT Party can offer, and a smaller, more efficient government is the most powerful thing we can actually demand as a country to make sure that the next generation wants to stay here rather than being chased away by the deadweight cost of a government that costs too much and imposes too much on their lives.
Telling it like it is, why did you choose that as the theme of the speech?
You know, even ex-worst enemies admit that we are honest and principled. You may not agree with us, but it's pretty unusual that you wouldn't think we were telling it like it is.
And in terms of debt, you say that the government's still not got debt under control. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, the government is working towards a surplus in the short term. By that I mean the next 4 years. However, in the long term, we have oceans of red ink. We haven't worked out how to pay for a 20th century welfare state with 21st century demographics, where there are fewer children per retiree and therefore not enough tax to cover the pension and healthcare. The only way to work with that is to grow the economy faster and become more efficient in services like health.
You say that New Zealand could be on a collision course for bankruptcy. Is that a challenge, criticism to Nicola Willis?
No, because Nicola Willis is doing what is necessary in the short term. Nobody, and not just in New Zealand but around the world, is dealing with the long-term challenge that we have a 20th century welfare state that is not suitable for 21st century demographics, when there are more people dependent, fewer children being had, less taxpayers in the future. The numbers no longer add up, and the only way to deal with that is to take your government that's big and inefficient and make it smaller and more efficient.
Sure, but currently critics argue that Nicola Willis is borrowing just as much as the previous government. You yourself admit that the government hasn't got the books under control, so is she doing a good job or not?
She's doing a good job with the cards that she's been dealt. Nobody doubts that the ACT Party would go further in saving money, but also that the government has gone further because ACT's in it. So the government hasn't gone as far as ACT would, but it's gone further than it would without us. And we can point to areas where the government is saving money because of things that ACT has specifically done and advocated for. And maybe the way to get to a surplus faster would be to elect more ACT MPs, because so far every ACT MP, every ACT voter is saving $57,000 for the taxpayer.
You also pointed out that the number of bureaucrats in Wellington has not decreased, despite that being a huge focus of Nicola Willis's cuts across Wellington. So, you know, is she doing a good job or not in that area?
Well, these challenges are bigger than Nicola Willis. I've got a lot of time for Nicola personally, but what I've learnt is that actually nobody has the full control and power to make the changes necessary. That's why we need the smaller, more efficient government with fewer ministers and more direct accountability.
How much of a bottom line will that be for you going into, you know, forming another coalition if you're in that position?
Well, we've got another 9 months, so if we start dropping bottom lines already, we could run out before the election. But you can see that this is existential to New Zealand. If we don't get a government that responds to people's needs, they'll stop believing in the government, they'll stop trusting it, and we won't be able to afford it.
If we're not going to return to surplus, a small surplus by 2030, why would a young Kiwi stay here for 4 years? What would you say to them?
Well, New Zealand remains a very good bet because we have the capacity to make change. We're still small enough, we still care enough, we love this country, and we are simple enough in our constitutional arrangement that someone can actually get in there and make the changes. But we need that smaller cabinet, that more direct accountability for each department so that we can start managing the cost. There needs to be somebody who says, right, here's my budget, here's my contract between the minister and the department, here's what they're delivering and here's how I'm holding them accountable. You don't hear that talk at the moment because most departments have about 10 ministers.
Yeah, reducing the number of MPs, that sounds quite complex. How do you actually go about doing that if you were to implement that?
It's actually, MPs would be very complex, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about ministers. Ministers are appointed by the Prime Minister of the day. In theory, the Prime Minister could say, right, we're going to have only 5 or only 10 or only 20. They could pick any number. It's a very simple administrative thing to do. I accept it won't happen before the election because everyone cut a deal and here we are. But if we have leverage to form a government, we will be saying, come on guys, we're prepared to take a smaller share of ministerial portfolios because we think that New Zealand matters more than baubles.
So ACT would be willing to take a smaller number of ministerial portfolios in the next term of government?
Of course, and for as long as I've been leading this party, we have been driven by policy achievements rather than ministerial portfolios. I mean, I would look at Simon Court, for example. I would argue he's been one of, if not the most effective reformers in this government through his RM changes, and yet he's not a minister. And in 10, 20 years' time, Simon will look back and say, what was more important, the title or my kids living in a country where it's possible to build a house? I think I know what Simon's answer would be. I hope it's very easy.
That's right.
Yeah.
You've got 4 associate ministerial portfolios. Are you saying the work you're doing there isn't entirely necessary?
I think that the work being done is necessary, but it's much, much harder when, for example, a report often needs to be signed by multiple ministers, taking a period of time before it can be done. And so I would rather have clearer lines of accountability, one person, one department, and go from there. And I just give you one example, that the Overseas Investment Office, under Labour, if someone wanted to invest in New Zealand, the Overseas Investment Office would write a report, and then it would go to one minister, and then it would go to another minister, and then it would go back to them. And I used to get these things every Sunday, and sometimes it had missed a weekend previously, so it was actually like the third week. And then, assuming I got to it, then it'd be like a month. And I looked at it, and I thought, actually, we don't need to sign these. The professionals have made the call. They could just send us the controversial ones and it would be much easier. One of the reasons why we're doing overseas investment consents now in 28 days instead of 71 is that they're not spending, maybe 30 days going between different ministers' offices and getting sent home in weekend bags and all the rest. So I know that's quite a small and specific example, but this is the kind of stuff I've learned being in government in the last couple of years.
The Prime Minister has already rejected your idea last year that the ministerial lineup was already bloated. What makes you think that you can get that across the line now?
Well, since he rejected it, he actually has merged 4 departments. Since he rejected it, he's had the State Services Commissioner, or the Public Service Commissioner, has said that. So, no one's rejecting it. It's happening. It's an idea whose time has come.
Is it hypocritical of ACT to be calling for small government when you yourself have set up a new ministry?
No, because that ministry has actually saved more than its cost, and we actually got rid of the Productivity Commission to form it. So we were doing one out, one in before it was cool. And if you look at the reports from the Ministry for Regulation savings, it's cost about 20 million, but it has saved about 300 million. So it's saving almost 15 times more than it's costing. Why? Because every other department's made too much red tape.
Do you run the risk of putting too much workload onto one single minister across what currently is a range of different portfolios? And also, is there a risk that that particular minister may have too much power?
Well, first of all, they'll have power, but they'll also have accountability. At the moment, you've got a huge amount of work because you're having to coordinate with other ministers, and it's not clear who's accountable to you. But also, if a minister does something wrong, it's not always clearly their issue. So, yep, you're right, there is a risk that it puts more of a focus on one minister, but that accountability will also improve the performance.
You mentioned this idea of scapegoating groups in your speech. Is there a wider issue that you're speaking to here?
We've done it for too long in New Zealand. I mean, you look at the last 6 years. It was, rents went up, we blamed the landlords. There was a terrible terrorist attack. I was here that day. We blamed 250,000 licensed firearm owners who were just as disgusted as anyone else. The price of milk went up. We blamed the farmers for a while. Then lately it's been the supermarkets and the banks. Jacinda Ardern said that the oil companies were fleecing us, and we had to go at the petrol stations for a while. I mean, we're always blaming some small group of New Zealanders for our problems. And the truth is that if we got rid of all of those people, sometimes it's immigrants, if we got rid of all the immigrants, our problems wouldn't be solved, we'd have much bigger problems. So, we've got to realise this is 5 million people. If you go out to the rest of the world and they say, how many of you are there? You say 5 million. So what do? Oh, spend time divided and blaming each other. They'd say that's nuts. You've got to work together with such a small country.
And who is to blame?
Sorry.
Who is to blame here?
I think it's a cultural problem that we all have to take responsibility for and take on. For some reason, maybe it happens in other countries too, maybe we should be the first one to stop doing it. But this idea that, if the costs are going up, it's somehow the fault of somebody. Oh, I mean, baby boomers have copped it for the housing. But the truth is that what we need to do is work out, how do you make it easier to build homes? How do you make it easier to build more supply chains for supermarkets? Because most people actually do want to solve problems. How do you make it easier to rent out a property? If you make it easier, you'll find that actually most people, most of the time, do actually want to do the right thing.
You say the government isn't balancing the books. That's not a resounding endorsement of the coalition.
Well, it's a fact. It's in the Treasury documents. I believe what we've done by limiting our spending increases to about 1.6%, while inflation plus population growth is more like 4%. That means that we are driving about 2% efficiency out of government every year. So if you want to assess Nicola Willis's contribution, making the government 2% more efficient every year, that's not too bad. But I also believe that nobody, if made Minister of Finance in the current circumstances, would be able to get the books balanced in the long term. That's why we've got to change the way we operate to have a smaller, more efficient government.
Yeah, so what do you want to see, I guess?
I want to see the change start right from the top in that copper dome above the beehive. No ministers who don't go to the main cabinet meeting. Everyone's at the meeting. Everyone has one or a maximum of 2 departments, and every department answers to just one minister.
What are some of the vanity portfolios that you're talking about?
Well, I named one, the Minister for Auckland. Now, I know people will attack my friend Simeon. I think he's doing a good job, but I think that he, frankly, is doing a better job on things like health because he's actually in charge of a department that he can get results from.
Minister for Hunting and Fishing, would you scrap that?
Well, again, what do people in hunting and fishing need? They need conservation to be done well, they need laws that allow them to access the land, and they need firearms to be properly regulated. It's not obvious why there needs to be a specific minister for that.
What about Minister for Space?
Well, again, you need a good regulatory environment. Whether you need a specific minister and whether you need a specific department, I would argue that we have a minister for space because Peter Beck's already going to space.
You did talk up Rocket Lab in there. Isn't that an important portfolio to keep around?
Yeah, but this is exactly my point. I saw Peter Beck yesterday, and you know what he didn't say? Thank God there's a government department named after me.
And what about the Minister for Veterans? Could be controversial.
Well, again, there's a specific responsibility for people who went overseas and were often harmed badly defending our freedom. We have to keep that responsibility. Does it require a separate minister, or is it something that should be done by an efficient and effective minister in either defence or social development? It may be that there's already a person doing that kind of work.
Do you think that you could ruffle a bit of feathers, and it could, you could be a bit of debating around, which ministerial portfolios stay and which ones go? This
is not an attack on any particular person or how they're doing their job. It's a call for a system where everyone can do their job more easily.
You also say that the idea of a Labour Greens Te Pāti Māori government frightens you. Can you elaborate on that?
The problem is everything they say is about tearing someone down. There's not enough positivity from them. There's not asking, well, how do we build more homes? How do we get cheaper goods in the supermarkets? There's always some bad person somewhere that needs to be taxed more, regulated more, and that's actually the opposite of our Kiwi spirit. Our Kiwi spirit is that all of us, from the first Polynesian navigators to the people getting off the plane at Auckland International this morning, have all made a journey for a better life. They didn't come here for a more bureaucratic life.
And why was it important for you to kind of point out that it can be a collegial coalition partner? Was that in doubt?
No, it's something that we have proven that if people want to put somewhere to put their vote, if you believe that it's not just all tickety-boo and carry on. We do need more change. But also, we need someone that's not going to tear the house down, can deliver a stable government, and that's a very positive thing.
But you did mention in your speech that 2 years ago, some people might have questioned whether ACT could be a collegial part of it.
2 years ago, I think there was a question mark in people's minds. You know, when I became the Deputy Prime Minister, people thought, man, is this possible? And actually, you know, I've now been the Deputy Prime Minister for, I don't know, like 9 months or something. We're all still here and doing pretty well.
And you happy to go into it again with the likes of Winston Peters?
Yeah, look, I'll work. I'm a Democrat, so I'll work with whoever the government puts up. But I have to say, if I have a choice, working with more ACT MPs has been more effective for the taxpayer and for New Zealand's true spirit.
Labor now wants some assurances and more information from National before it will support the free trade agreement with India. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that's something that the Trade Minister will work through with them. The Labor Party has a proud tradition of bilateral support for a trading nation. I would seriously hope that the Labor Party are going to remain the adults in the room and keep their heads when some others may have lost theirs.
Are you confident in the deal as it stands?
Yeah, I am, because the access to India is a bonanza for so many New Zealand exporters. The immigration changes. In the fullness of time, when the facts come out, people will recognise that they are a tiny, tiny fraction of New Zealand immigration. So I understand that there are people who are worried about immigration, but I wouldn't direct my immigration concern towards this agreement. I believe the numbers will come out, and as someone once said, when the tide goes out, we'll see who's swimming naked.
They want protections for migrant workers and our reputation for providing quality education protected. They're reasonable demands, aren't they?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I've seen the agreement, and I don't see where they're going to have a problem there. The agreement will allow New Zealand to set its policy in terms of what student education visas require, and it will allow us to protect from migrant exploitation. So I can see why they'd be worried about that. It's an important thing to get right, but as it happens in the trade agreement, we have got it right.
Are you comfortable those demands are being met?
Yes, well, just in terms of right now, I believe that there are terrible things happening in our country, and we need to get tougher on migrant exploitation and immigration crime. There's no question about that. On the other hand, this trade agreement is not going to make the situation worse, may make it a bit better.
It's proposed that New Zealand will provide 33 billion New Zealand of private investment in India over 15 years. And if there's a shortfall, India could revoke market access for the apple, honey and kiwi fruit sectors. Is that true?
Well, certainly there's investment requirements. I wouldn't want to start pronouncing on the precise numbers on the fly, but that's the basic principle. And yes, there's a lot of New Zealanders who are asking, where do I park my money to get a good return? One place they could park it is one of the fastest growing countries on earth. I mean, there is now a middle class of 500 million people. Well, that's like Europe. I mean, the train is leaving the station in India, and I'm pleased that Kiwis are going to have a chance to get aboard.
You say the... Oh.
No, you're right. So you support that it is a good idea?
Oh, look, I absolutely support an agreement with India. The ACT Party is supporting it because we've always supported free trade, because when we trade value for value with our friends around the world, we get stronger together. And little prejudices will come and go, and politics will come and go, but the truth is, our country is a trading nation. Yeah.
You say the experiment of dividing ourselves into a treaty partnership has been a disaster. Many critiqued it. What do you say to those who think your bill was divisive?
Well, my bill said that we should all be respectful of the treaty and respectful of each other with equal rights and duties. Ngā tikanga katoa rite tahi, as the treaty itself says. If people think that standing up and saying our fundamental human dignity is alike regardless of where our ancestors came from, if they think that's divisive, I think they need to really ask themselves what exactly would be uniting. All right. Thank you very much, folks. We really appreciate you coming and covering our State of the Nation. We'll see you later. Thanks. Yeah. Cheers.